The Galactic Council chamber hummed with the usual background noise of 1,000 species pretending to respect each other. I'd been a diplomatic observer for the Krell Collective for roughly 200 cycles now. And if there's one thing I'd learned, it's that everyone thinks they're the smartest being in the room until proven catastrophically wrong. Today's entertainment? A human girl. Couldn't have been more than 25 standard years old. Standing there in front of the entire assembly wearing what looked like clothes she'd grabbed from a storage unit. Worn jacket, some kind of fabric wrapped around her neck, and an expression that said she'd rather be literally anywhere else. Her name was Maya Torres, and she'd been sent to negotiate humanity's entry into the collective's defense network. The problem? Nobody took humans seriously. They were the new kids, the babies of the galaxy. The species that had only figured out faster than light travel about 60 years ago and still thought wars were won with explosives and attitude. I watched from my observation pod as Ambassador Vex of the Morvian Empire leaned back in his floating throne, his 4 eyes gleaming with what I can only describe as predatory amusement. The Morvians were old, ancient, actually. They'd been conquering star systems when my ancestors were still learning which end of a plasma rifle to point at the enemy. So, Vex's voice boomed across the chamber, his translator rendering his words in perfect galactic standard. The humans wish to join our defense pact. Tell me, child, what exactly can your species offer? You have no psionic abilities. Your technology is primitive. Your military fleet numbers barely 3,000 ships. Maya didn't flinch. That should have been my first clue something was off. We offer what we've always offered, she said, her voice steady. Adaptability, creativity, and the kind of stubbornness that makes survival look easy. The chamber erupted in what I can only describe as the galactic equivalent of laughter. The Zephronians clicked their mandibles in amusement. The Thorian delegation made that weird whistling sound that passes for humor in their culture. Even the usually stoic Krell observers around me permitted themselves slight tremors of entertainment. One of the junior Morvian officers, a hothead named Kelvar, actually stood up from his position. Stubbornness? We should grant you membership based on stubbornness? Perhaps we should also recruit the Grenton swamp slugs. They're quite stubborn about not moving. More laughter. Maya's jaw tightened just a fraction. Her hand moved to the scarf around her neck, fingers brushing against the fabric. You find us amusing, she said. Not a question. A statement of fact. Deeply. Vex then replied, making no effort to hide his contempt. Your species stumbles into the galaxy making demands, threatening consequences, acting as though your brief existence grants you authority. Fought no real wars. You faced no true threats. Your children playing at being warriors. No real wars. Maya repeated slowly. Right. Of course. Her fingers gripped the edge of her scarf. Something in her eyes changed. I've seen combat veterans from a dozen species, and I recognize that look. It's the expression someone gets when they're deciding whether violence is necessary or just satisfying. Let me tell you something about humans, Maya said, her voice dropping lower. The chamber quieted despite itself. There's something about genuine danger that cuts through mockery like a blade through flesh. We didn't evolve on a gentle world. We didn't develop consciousness in some peaceful paradise. Earth tried to kill us every single day for 3 million years, and we survived anyway. Fascinating, Kelvar sneered. A harsh world, how unique. I'm certain no other species in this council has ever faced adversity. The laughter came back, but weaker this time. Uncertain. Maya's hand tightened on her scarf. We fought predators that could tear us apart with their claws. We survived diseases that killed millions. We endured ice ages and volcanic eruptions and floods that drowned entire continents. And when we finally became the dominant species on our planet, you know what we did? She paused. Nobody answered. We kept fighting each other for thousands of years, with increasingly horrible weapons and increasingly creative ways to cause suffering. We perfected warfare. We turned it into an art form. And then, when we finally got tired of killing each other, we looked up at the stars and said, "Wonder what's out there." Vex then waved a dismissive hand. Ancient history. Every species has a violent past. You're not special. You're right, Maya said. We're not special. We're just really, really good at not dying when we're supposed to. She unwound the scarf from her neck in one smooth motion. The tattoo blazed to life, like someone had lit a fire under her. Skin. It covered her entire right shoulder, neck, and part of her chest. A dragon rendered in lines that seemed to shift and move in the light. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was that it was glowing. Actually glowing, with a light that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. The chamber went silent. Not the polite quiet of diplomatic proceedings, but the absolute silence of predators suddenly realizing they might be prey. "This," Maya said, her voice carrying across the stunned assembly, "is a mark. Every human who survives military service in the Frontier Defense Corps gets one. The design is personal, but the ink? That's special. It's called bonded bio-luminescent polymer. Reacts to adrenaline, combat stims, and neural interface activation." She took 3 steps forward. The Morvian guards tensed, hands moving toward weapons. "It also reacts to threat assessment," Maya continued. "Right now, my implants are reading this room, analyzing tactical positions, identifying weak points in your security grid, calculating kill ratios and escape routes. Want to know what's really funny?" Nobody laughed. "I'm not even combat rated. I'm a translator. I speak 17 languages and barely passed my basic military training. But every human in our fleet, from mechanics to medical staff to yes, even translators, goes through the same program. Know why?" Vekthan's expression had shifted from amusement to something approaching concern. "Why?" "Because we learned something during our first contact war," Maya said. And her smile could have cut steel. "The one you don't know about yet. The one that happened 30 years before we showed up on your sensors, singing songs about peace and cooperation." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I checked my suit's environmental controls, but they were fine. The cold was coming from somewhere else. From the sudden realization that maybe, just maybe, humanity had been playing a very long game. "What war?" I heard myself asking. Breaking observer protocol for the first time in my career. Maya's eyes found me in the crowd. "The Vex Incursion. 27 years ago, an extradimensional species decided Earth looked like a nice place to set up a harvesting operation. They came through a tear in space-time near Jupiter with ships that made your dreadnoughts look like cargo haulers, biological weapons that could rewrite DNA, gravity manipulators, reality warping technology." She let that sink in for a moment. "They killed 4 billion of us in the first week. Burned entire continents, turned our oceans acidic, made parts of our planet physically incompatible with human life. The experts said we had maybe a month before extinction. Our leaders prepared evacuation ships for whoever we could save. But you survived," Vekthan said slowly. "Obviously. We did better than survive. We adapted. See, humans have this really annoying habit of looking at impossible situations and saying, okay, but what if we try it anyway?" Our scientists couldn't understand Vex technology, so they stopped trying to understand it and just started breaking it. Our military couldn't win conventional battles, so we stopped fighting conventionally. The tattoo flared brighter. I realized with a start that other lights were appearing around the chamber. Small pinpoints of luminescence. Other humans in the assembly, their own marks responding to Maya's rising adrenaline. There were more of them than I'd thought, scattered through the crowd like stars in the darkness. "We went asymmetrical," Maya said. "Guerrilla warfare on a planetary scale. We used their own portals against them, sent strike teams into their supply lines, learned to pilot their ships by trial and catastrophic error. We turned Earth itself into a weapon. Booby-trapped cities, poison in the water they tried to harvest, viruses designed to corrupt their biological processors." Her voice had taken on a quality I'd never heard before. Not pride, exactly. Something darker. Something earned through fire and blood. The Vex had better technology. They had superior numbers. They had weapons we couldn't even comprehend. But we had something they didn't understand. We had spite. We had 3 million years of evolutionary trauma telling us that giving up meant death. We had the memory of every single human who'd ever looked at terrible odds and said, "Not today." "How long?" someone asked from the Thorian delegation. "How long did the war last?" 18 months, Maya replied. 18 months of absolute hell. 18 months of losing ground every day and fighting anyway. 18 months of watching our planet die and refusing to let it go quietly. And then something changed. She moved to the center of the chamber now. The guards didn't stop her. Everyone was too busy listening, too busy recalculating everything they thought they knew about this upstart species. We stopped trying to beat them at their own game, Maya said. We started playing ours instead. Humans are really good at psychological warfare. We're excellent at terror tactics. We understand on a fundamental level that sometimes the best weapon isn't the one that kills the most enemies. It's the one that makes them afraid to fight. What did you do? I asked again, unable to stop myself. Maya's smile was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. We made them scared of us. Every time they landed a harvesting team, we made sure none of them went home. Every portal they opened, we sent something back through. Something worse than they'd sent to us. We learned their language, intercepted their communications, and broadcast the screams of their dying soldiers across every frequency they used. The chamber had become a tomb. Everyone understood now. The gentle, diplomatic humans who'd arrived talking about peace and cooperation had teeth they'd chosen not to show. We made them believe Earth was cursed, that we were demons, that every human they faced was willing to die just to take one of them down. And you know what the really funny part is? She laughed, and it wasn't a happy sound. We weren't bluffing. Every word was true. We were willing to die. All of us. Every man, woman, and child who survived those first weeks made the same decision. If we were going extinct, we were taking them with us. Vex then had gone very still in his throne. What happened? How did it end? The Vex withdrew, sealed their portals, abandoned Earth completely. Not because we defeated them militarily, we couldn't, but because the cost of harvesting our planet exceeded its value. We made extinction too expensive to be worth the effort. Maya held up her arm, showing the dragon tattoo in all its terrible glory. Every human veteran carries these marks. Reminders of what we survived. Warnings of what we're capable of. We came to your council asking for membership, not because we need your protection, but because we'd prefer to be friends, rather than the alternative. The silence stretched like a physical thing. Finally, Ambassador Vex then spoke, his voice stripped of its earlier mockery. Why didn't you tell us about this war before? Why keep it secret? Would you have believed us? Maya asked simply. A species claiming to have fought off extradimensional invaders before even making formal contact with galactic civilization? You'd have laughed us out of the chamber, just like you did 5 minutes ago. She had a point. Besides, Maya continued, we prefer people underestimate us. Makes negotiations simpler when the other side thinks we're desperate and weak. Makes them show their hand before we have to show ours. I watched Vecthan's expressions cycle through several emotions before settling on something resembling respect mixed with healthy fear. The Frontier Defense Corps, he said slowly. How many humans serve? About 40% of our total population. Mandatory service, 3 years minimum. We learned our lesson. Never again will humanity be caught unprepared. 40%. I did the math quickly. Earth's population was roughly 11 billion. That meant nearly 4.5 billion humans had military training, had been taught to fight against impossible odds, had proven they could survive extinction-level threats through sheer bloody-minded refusal to die, and they'd hidden it, deliberately, walked into galactic society playing the role of innocent newcomers while secretly maintaining one of the most terrifying military organizations I'd ever heard of. So, Maya said, her voice returning to its earlier diplomatic tone. The tattoo's glow faded back to a dull shimmer. Shall we discuss the terms of humanity's membership in the Defense Pact, or would you prefer we explore other options? It wasn't a threat. Not technically. But everyone in that chamber understood the subtext. Humanity was joining the collective one way or another. The only question was whether it happened, through cooperation or through the kind of demonstration nobody wanted to see. Ambassador Vex then looked at Maya for a long moment. Then he did something I'd never seen in 200 cycles of diplomatic observation. He bowed. Actually bowed, inclining his head in a gesture of respect that Morvians reserve for equals and honored enemies. We would be honored, he said carefully, to welcome humanity into the collective defense network, with full voting rights and command authority appropriate to your demonstrated capabilities. Maya smiled. A real smile this time, warm and genuine. Excellent. My government will be pleased. Now, shall we move on to the boring part? I believe there are approximately 4,000 pages of treaty documentation to review. The chamber erupted into activity as delegates began pulling up files and databases, suddenly very interested in learning everything they could about humanity's true capabilities. I sat back in my observation pod, my official reports already writing themselves in my mind. But underneath the dry diplomatic language, one thought kept repeating itself. We'd been laughing at the humans, mocking them, treating them like children playing at galactic politics. And the whole time, they'd been the most dangerous species in the room. 3 months after Maya Torres made the Galactic Council collectively wet themselves, I found myself assigned to humanity's primary military station. Lucky me. The Krell Collective wanted detailed reports on our newest allies, and apparently my skill at not dying during diplomatic incidents made me the perfect candidate. The station was called Bastion 7, floating in high orbit above Earth. It looked like someone had taken a dozen different architectural styles, thrown them in a blender, and built whatever came out. Efficient? Absolutely. Pretty? Not even close. Observer Thekmol. A voice cut through my contemplation as I finished docking procedures. Welcome aboard. The human, approaching me, was built like a cargo hauler. Tall, broad-shouldered, with skin the color of burnt copper and eyes that had seen entirely too much combat. His uniform indicated senior rank, and the dragon tattoo visible on his forearm glowed faintly even in the station's calm environment. Captain James Okafor, he introduced himself, extending his hand in that peculiar human greeting ritual. I grasped it carefully, mindful of their surprising grip strength. I'll be your liaison during your stay. Hope you brought comfortable shoes. This station's about 40 kilometers of corridor on a good day. I appreciate the hospitality, Captain. I tried to sound confident, tried and probably failed. Something about being surrounded by a species that had casually mentioned fighting off extradimensional horrors made confidence difficult. James laughed. Actually laughed. Like my nervousness was charming rather than sensible self-preservation. Relax, we don't bite. Well, most of us don't. There's a guy in engineering who might nibble if you mess with his fusion cores, but we keep him sedated. He was joking. Probably. Human humor remained one of the great mysteries of my career. We walked through corridors that hummed with activity, humans everywhere, moving with purpose and efficiency. But what caught my attention were the others. Krell soldiers, training alongside humans. Thorian technicians working on weapon systems. Even a few Zephronians in medical uniforms. Surprised? James asked, noticing my stare. Ambassador Vekthan made joining the Defense Pact sound like humanity strong-armed the Council. Did we? Huh. James grinned. Vekthan's still salty about looking stupid. Between you and me, half the Council was looking for an excuse to bring us in. They just needed political cover. Maya gave them that. We entered what James called the Tactical Operations Center. Screens covered every wall, displaying star charts, fleet positions, sensor data from 1,000 locations. Humans and aliens worked side by side, their movements coordinated like a well-rehearsed dance. This is Commander Lisa Park. James introduced me to a woman who looked like she survived on coffee and spite. She runs tactical analysis. Smartest person on this station. Don't tell her I said that. Lisa barely glanced up from her displays. Too late, I heard. And you're right. She finally looked at me, her expression sharp. Thekmol. Krell Observer. Your file says you witnessed Maya's performance at the Council. Performance. The word choice seemed deliberate. What would you call it? Lisa asked. She walked into a room full of arrogant bureaucrats and scared them straight. That takes planning. Preparation. Theater. The Vex War, I said carefully. That was real though, right? The room went quiet. Not completely silent, but the background noise dropped noticeably. Several humans turned to look at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Yeah, James said, his earlier humor gone. That was real. Every word Maya said happened exactly like she described. We've got the scars to prove it. Lisa tapped her console. One of the main screens shifted, displaying what looked like a planetary surface. Except the ground was wrong. Crystallized in places, melted in others. With structures that hurt to look at because they existed in too many dimensions simultaneously. Northern China, Lisa said quietly. Former population, 800 million. Current population 0. The Vex used it as a testing ground for their reality-warping weapons. Turns out human consciousness doesn't handle fourth-dimensional space very well. Everyone in the affected zones just stopped. Not died. Stopped. Like someone hit pause on their existence. I felt my stomach drop. Can they be saved? We're working on it. 18 years later, we're still working on it. Best estimates say maybe another decade before we understand the physics well enough to attempt reversal. Maybe. James pulled up another image. This one showed Earth from orbit, beautiful blue and green, but with dark patches scattered across the surface. South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, Australia, all partially uninhabitable. We've reclaimed some territory, but there are zones where physics just doesn't work right anymore. Gravity fluctuations, temporal distortions, places where going in means you might come out 3 days before you entered. And you still fought, I said, knowing you couldn't win. We fought because we couldn't afford not to, Lisa corrected. Giving up meant extinction. We fought. Fighting meant maybe, possibly, we'd survive long enough to find an advantage. Humans are really good at surviving long enough. A klaxon suddenly blared. Red lights flashed across the operations center. Every human in the room moved instantly. No panic, just immediate coordinated action. Report, James barked. Sensor contact. Bearing 275 Mark 8. Someone called out. Multiple signatures. Configuration matches Hegemony Raider class. The Hegemony. I'd heard of them. Pirates, slavers, operating out of the lawless sectors beyond council jurisdiction. Dangerous but usually smart enough to avoid military targets. Numbers? Lisa was already pulling up tactical displays. 18 ships, frigate equivalent. Their broadcasting demands. Want us to surrender the station or face destruction. James and Lisa exchanged glances. Then they started laughing. Actually laughing while facing down an attack force. Oh no, James said between chuckles. 18 whole ships. However will we cope? Lisa wiped her eyes. Okay. We should probably respond professionally. She hit the communications panel. Hegemony vessels. This is Bastion 7. You have 30 seconds to alter course and vacate this system before we demonstrate why attacking human military installations is considered suicide in civilized space. The response came quickly, full of bluster and threats. Something about selling humans as exotic slaves and melting the station for scrap. Well, James sighed. We tried being nice. Lisa? On it. Activating defense grid. Scrambling intercept wings. Charging primary weapons. Want me to wake up the fun toys? Not yet. Let's see if conventional ordnance handles this. No need to show off for our guests. James glanced at me. Thek Mol, you might want to grab something stable. This gets bumpy. The station shuddered slightly. Through the viewports, I watched as sections of Bastion 7's hull opened like flower petals. Weapons emerged. Lots of weapons. More weapons than any station I'd ever seen, because apparently humans believed in the philosophy of overwhelming firepower. Launching fighters, someone announced. Small craft poured from the station's bays. Hundreds of them, moving in formations so tight they looked like schools of fish. Each one bristled with weapons and moved with an agility that shouldn't have been possible at those speeds. The Hegemony Raiders opened fire first. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds filled the space between fleets. Bastion 7's shields absorbed the hits easily, barely flickering under the assault. Their turn, Lisa said calmly. What happened next redefined my understanding of military efficiency. The human fighters didn't just attack. They swarmed, surrounded individual raider ships and tore them apart with surgical precision. The station's main guns fired, and 3 raider vessels simply ceased to exist, vaporized by particle beams that cut through shields and armor like they weren't there. 12 enemy ships remaining, someone reported. They're attempting to retreat. Jam their communications, James ordered. Don't let them call for help, but let them run. Maybe they'll learn something. Within 2 minutes, the entire engagement was over. The surviving Hegemony ships fled at maximum acceleration, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. Human fighters returned to their bays in perfect formation. The weapons retracted back into the station's hull. Total human casualties? 0. Not even a damaged fighter. That was restrained? I managed to ask. Very. Lisa confirmed. We didn't use missiles, didn't deploy our capital ships, didn't activate point defense lasers, didn't use electronic warfare suites, and definitely didn't break out the experimental weapons. That was basically us answering the door and politely suggesting the visitors leave. James pulled up a star chart. See, here's the thing about humanity. The Vex War taught us some important lessons. First, always be prepared. Second, overwhelming force prevents prolonged conflicts. Third, reputation is a weapon all by itself. He highlighted several systems on the map. Since joining the council, we've had approximately 47 groups try to test us. Pirates, raiders, a few species with grudges against the council. Know how many successful attacks there've been? Zero? Zero. Because word spreads fast. Attack humans, get destroyed. Simple equation. We don't negotiate with aggressors. We don't show mercy to slavers. We end threats quickly and efficiently, then we go back to our regular jobs. Lisa pulled up more data. The Vex War broke something in humanity. Or maybe fixed something. We stopped pretending war was noble or glorious. Started treating it like a job that needed doing. No drama, no posturing, just cold math and colder execution. That sounds terrifying. It should, James agreed. But here's the thing. We're only terrifying to people who mean us harm. Everyone else? We're actually pretty friendly. We share technology, provide military support, help with disasters. The council species are starting to figure out that having humans as allies means having the scariest guard dogs in the galaxy. An alert chimed on Lisa's console. She glanced at it, smiled, and pulled up a communication. Speak of the devil. Maya Torres appeared on the screen, looking slightly disheveled but triumphant. James, Lisa, we just finished negotiations with the Peltharian Consortium. They're signing the Mutual Defense Agreement. How'd you manage that? James asked. Last report said they were refusing to even meet with human representatives. I showed them footage from the hegemony incident about 15 minutes ago. Suddenly they became very interested in friendly relations. Maya's expression turned serious. How's our observer doing? Everyone looked at me. I managed a weak wave. He's learning, Lisa said. Slowly, but learning. Good. Thekmol, I need you to understand something. Maya leaned forward, her dragon tattoo visible at her collar. Everything we showed the council, everything we're showing you now, this isn't us being aggressive. This is us being careful. We survived extinction by being prepared for the absolute worst-case scenario. That doesn't turn off just because we made some friends. I understand, I said. And surprisingly, I did. Humanity wasn't trying to conquer the galaxy or dominate other species. They were just making absolutely certain that nothing like the Vex could ever threaten them again. There's something else you should know, James said, his tone shifting. Something we haven't told the council yet. Something Maya mentioned to give them context. He pulled up a display showing a section of space beyond the galactic rim. Empty void. Nothing remarkable. Except for the readings, energy signatures that made no sense, spatial distortions that shouldn't exist. We're still monitoring the sectors where the Vex portals appeared, Lisa explained, looking for any sign they might return. 3 weeks ago, we detected something. Not Vex. Something different. Bigger energy signatures. More sophisticated dimensional manipulation. My blood went cold. Another invasion? Unknown. Could be. Could be something worse. Could be nothing. James crossed his arms. But if it is something, humanity won't face it alone, this time. That's why we pushed so hard to join the council. That's why we're building alliances as fast as possible. Because if the galaxy faces an existential threat, we want everyone ready. The council needs to know, I said immediately. They will, Maya assured me from the screen. But we're gathering data first. Making sure we have facts instead of fears. Should have a full report ready in 2 weeks. Until then, we're quietly increasing military readiness across all allied systems. The implications crashed over me like a wave. Humanity hadn't joined the Galactic Council seeking protection. They'd joined to protect everyone else. Because they knew what was out there. What could be out there. And they refused to let another species suffer what they'd endured. This is why you're really here, I said to James. Not just to let me observe. You're preparing the council species for something. Smart. Lisa nodded. Yeah. We're building a coalition. Training programs. Technology. Sharing. Joint tactical exercises. Getting everyone ready for a threat that might never come. Because the alternative is waiting until it's too late. James clapped me on the shoulder, his earlier humor returning. But hey, no pressure. For now, enjoy the tour. Learn about humanity. Make your reports. Just remember one thing. What? We're the species that looked at extinction and said no. Whatever's coming, whatever threats emerge from the dark between stars, humanity isn't running. And neither are our friends. That's the real message you should take back to your superiors. I spent the next 3 weeks on Bastion 7. Watched humans train with alien allies. Saw technology being adapted and shared. Witnessed coordination drills that turned diverse species into unified fighting forces. Every day, I understood more clearly what Maya had really accomplished at the council. She hadn't threatened them. She'd offered them hope. Hope that the next existential crisis wouldn't have to be faced alone. Hope that humanity's hard-won experience and stubborn refusal to die could be shared, could protect others from similar fates. The dragon tattoos weren't just marks of survival, they were promises, reminders of what humanity had endured and overcome, warnings to enemies that this species would fight to the last breath, and guarantees to allies that humans would stand beside them when darkness came calling. On my final day, James walked me back to my shuttle. "What'll you tell the Krell Collective?" "The truth," I said. "That humanity is exactly what the galaxy needs. Terrifying when necessary, but standing guard so others can sleep safely." "That'll do," James smiled. "Safe travels, Thekmol. And when that report comes out about the spatial anomalies, make sure your people are ready. Because ready or not, the universe keeps throwing challenges at us." "Will humanity be ready?" I asked. James looked up at Earth, beautiful and scarred, spinning peacefully below us. "We're always ready. That's kind of our thing. Besides, we've got allies now, friends, people worth fighting for. That makes us more dangerous than we've ever been." I boarded my shuttle, my mind full of observations and conclusions. As I departed, I watched Bastion 7 recede into the distance, a monument to human resilience, a fortress built by survivors, a beacon promising that extinction wasn't inevitable, that hope could be found even in the darkest moments. They'd laughed at the human girl, mocked her species as primitive and weak, and she'd pulled aside her scarf to reveal the dragon, glowing with the light of 4.5 billion warriors who'd stared into the abyss and refused to blink. The galaxy would never make that mistake again. And somehow, I suspected that was exactly what humanity had intended all along.